What if you poured your soul into a creation that could change the world, only to sense a shadow lurking behind your every step, waiting to claim it as its own? My name is Lucy, a 32-year-old AI architect, and for 18 months, I toiled in the heart of Silicon Valley to build Sentinel Shield, a cybersecurity system so advanced it could predict and neutralize threats before they struck. At Titan Tech, a startup buzzing with promise and flush with venture capital, I believed I'd found the perfect stage to bring my vision to life. The sleek offices, humming servers, and endless resources felt like a dream, until I glimpsed the truth behind the polished facade. This is the story of how I built a revolution, how it was nearly stolen, and how I ensured no one could take what was mine. I wasn't always at Titan Tech. Before this, I spent years at Microsoft, honing my expertise in artificial intelligence, crafting algorithms that danced with precision. But a restless ambition burned in me, a vision for a system that didn't just react to cyber attacks, but anticipated them, like a guardian watching the horizon. Sentinel Shield was my brainchild, named after the vigilant protectors of mythology. It could analyze network patterns, detect anomalies before they coalesced into threats, and deploy adaptive defenses in real time. When Titan Tech recruited me, offering a lead role and a blank check for resources, I left the safety of Microsoft behind. Silicon Valley's pulse thrummed with possibility, and I was ready to make history. Titan Tech was everything you'd imagine a startup to be: glass-walled meeting rooms, ping-pong tables, and a buzz of innovation that kept us awake past midnight. My lab was my sanctuary, a maze of monitors and code where Sentinel Shield took shape. For 18 months, I worked 80-hour weeks, fueled by coffee and conviction. The system grew smarter with every iteration, learning to identify vulnerabilities I hadn't even programmed it to see. It was exhilarating, like watching a child learn to run. My colleagues called me obsessive, but I didn't care. This was my legacy, a shield to protect the digital world from chaos. Then there was Brandon Holt, Titan Tech's CEO. He was the kind of leader who could sell sand in a desert, charismatic, polished, with a smile that gleamed under the fluorescent lights. He'd stop by my lab now and then, leaning against the doorframe, tossing out compliments like confetti. "Brilliant work, Lucy," he'd say, his eyes scanning my screens. "The board's ecstatic about your progress." His praise felt warm, but there was something in his gaze, a flicker of calculation, that never quite reached his smile. I brushed it off as paranoia. After all, Titan Tech was funding my dream, and Brandon seemed invested in its success. I had no idea he was already plotting to make Sentinel Shield his own, to erase my name from the creation I'd poured my life into. But I'd learn soon enough, and when I did, I'd be ready. 3 days ago, I stood on the edge of history, my heart pounding with the thrill of a breakthrough that could redefine cybersecurity. Sentinel Shield had just aced its most rigorous test yet, neutralizing a simulated cyber attack so sophisticated it mimicked the tactics of nation-state hackers. The system didn't just stop the attack, it predicted it, identifying vulnerabilities I hadn't even coded it to detect. At 32, I'd built something extraordinary at Titan Tech, and I couldn't wait to share the results with Brandon Holt. Little did I know that meeting would shatter my trust and set the stage for a battle I'd been preparing for without even realizing it. The test results were staggering. In a Silicon Valley lab humming with servers, Sentinel Shield had run the simulation flawlessly, its algorithms weaving a web of defense that adapted in milliseconds. It flagged patterns no human could have spotted, generating reports that pinpointed weaknesses in the mock network. I stayed up all night, triple-checking the data, my excitement bubbling over. This wasn't just a success, it was a leap forward. Proof that Sentinel Shield could protect banks, hospitals, even governments from the chaos of cybercrime. I emailed Brandon's assistant, Rachel, requesting a meeting. She squeezed me into a 15-minute slot the next afternoon, and I spent the morning polishing my demo, envisioning the board's awe when they saw what I'd built. When I arrived at Brandon's corner office, a wall of glass overlooking Silicon Valley's sprawl, I sensed something was off. Brandon sat behind his desk, his expression unreadable, and beside him was Andrea Fields, Titan Tech's legal counsel, her face as cold as the marble floor. "Have a seat, Lucy," Brandon said, gesturing to a chair. His voice was smooth, but there was a sharpness beneath it, like a blade wrapped in silk. Andrea's presence made my stomach twist. "She's just here as a formality," Brandon added, but the words felt hollow. I clutched my laptop, ready to showcase Sentinel Shield's triumph, but the air in the room told me this wasn't about my demo. "Before we discuss Sentinel Shield," Brandon continued, sliding a document across the table, "we need to address some concerns about your employment agreement." My pulse quickened. Andrea cleared her throat, her voice flat. "Section 14.3 of your contract states that any intellectual property developed using company resources belongs exclusively to Titan Tech." I nodded, anticipating the direction but refusing to flinch. "I'm aware of standard IP clauses," I said, keeping my tone steady. "But Sentinel Shield was conceptualized long before I joined Titan Tech. I have documentation, notes, prototypes, proving it." Andrea didn't blink. "While you may have had a basic idea," she said, "the fully functional system was developed here, on Titan Tech's time, using Titan Tech's resources." Brandon leaned forward, his pretense of warmth vanishing. "Let's be honest, Lucy. Sentinel Shield belongs to Titan Tech. The board believes your compensation package is more than fair for your contribution." I frowned, the word compensation landing like a stone. "Compensation package?" I asked. He gave a thin smile. "Your contract includes a success bonus. You'll receive a one-time payment of $300,000 once Sentinel Shield launches. That's generous by industry standards." The number hit me like a slap. $300,000 for a system worth billions, for 18 months of relentless work, for my vision. My hands tightened into fists, but Brandon pressed on, oblivious to my fury. "Tomorrow, I'll present the Sentinel Shield to our biggest investors. We expect to secure $75 million in funding. After that, we announce Titan Tech's groundbreaking cybersecurity solution." I stared at him, my mind racing. "You're firing me?" I asked, my voice low. Andrea sighed. "We're transitioning you out, effective immediately, of course with your bonus." Brandon smirked, a predator savoring his victory. "Congratulations, Lucy. Your employment is terminated." The words echoed in the sterile office, each one a betrayal. I should have screamed, threatened lawsuits, and demanded justice. But a strange calm settled over me. They expected resistance, were prepared for it. What they didn't know was that I'd seen this coming, not in its entirety, but enough to plant a seed of protection. 6 months ago, I'd caught Brandon snooping in my secure server, and I'd built a safeguard into Sentinel Shield, a trap they'd never see coming. I stood, handed over my laptop, and said smoothly, "Good luck with the investor demo, Mr. Holt." Security escorted me out, watching as I packed my belongings into a cardboard box. I left Titan Tech like countless others, but I wasn't defeated. I was ready to turn the tables. As I walked out of Titan Tech, a cardboard box cradled in my arms and security guards flanking me like sentinels of my defeat, a quiet certainty pulsed beneath my calm facade. Brandon Holt thought he'd won, thought he could erase me from Sentinel Shield and claim my creation for his own. But I'd seen the glint of his ambition months ago, and I'd woven a trap into the very system he sought to steal, a safeguard that would unravel his plans at the perfect moment. My name is Lucy, I'm 32, and in Silicon Valley's cutthroat arena, I'd learned that the greatest threats often wear the mask of allies. 6 months earlier, a late-night alert had jolted me from my work. My secure development server, a digital fortress for Sentinel Shield's code, had registered an unauthorized access attempt. The logs pointed to Brandon's credentials, used after hours when the lab was dark. Nothing was taken, no files altered, but the intrusion was a warning, a whisper of betrayal. I didn't confront him. Accusations without proof would only paint me as paranoid. Instead, I turned my fear into action. If Sentinel Shield could predict external cyber attacks, why not internal ones? I began embedding safeguards, not just to shield the system from hackers, but from those within Titan Tech who might covet it. My code became a labyrinth, with hidden triggers designed to protect my legacy. The most critical safeguard was a special piece of code, buried deep in the presentation software for Sentinel Shield's investor demo. Set to activate precisely 10 minutes into the showcase, it would disrupt the system's operations, exposing vulnerabilities only I could resolve. It wasn't sabotage, Sentinel Shield was too precious for that. But a calculated failsafe, a digital lock that required my authorization to function fully. I spent weeks perfecting it, testing it in isolated environments, ensuring it would perform flawlessly under pressure. Each line of code was a promise to myself. No one would take what I'd built without a fight. As security watched me pack my belongings that afternoon, I felt their eyes like weights, but I kept my movements deliberate, my expression neutral. My laptop, now in Titan Tech's possession, held no secrets. It was a clean shell, its critical data mirrored on a private, encrypted drive I'd secured months ago. I placed my coffee mug and a framed photo of my old Microsoft team into the box, the mundane relics of a life I was leaving behind. But as I handed over my badge and stepped into the California sunlight, a smile tugged at my lips. Brandon's victory was an illusion, a house of cards waiting for my breath to topple it. That night, I didn't pace or plot revenge. I ordered takeout, pad thai from my favorite spot in Palo Alto, settled onto my couch, and streamed a sitcom, its canned laughter a strange counterpoint to the storm brewing at Titan Tech. The trap was set, the code primed to spring. I imagined Brandon, smug in his office, preparing his pitch to investors, unaware that Sentinel Shield was loyal to its creator. My phone lay silent, but I knew it wouldn't stay that way. The demo was hours away, and when my safeguard activated, Titan Tech would come crawling back. I wasn't just a coder, I was a strategist, and in Silicon Valley, foresight was the sharpest weapon of all. At 9:30 p.m., as I sipped chamomile tea and half-watched a sitcom's flickering screen, my phone buzzed with a call that shattered the evening's calm. Rachel, Brandon's assistant, her voice tight with urgency, said, "He wants to see you. It's urgent. A car's on its way." I glanced at the clock, a spark of anticipation igniting. My trap had sprung, and Titan Tech was reeling. I'm Lucy, 32, and in that moment I knew Sentinel Shield had done exactly what I'd designed it to do, expose the threat within. I slipped on a jacket, steadied my breath, and prepared to face the man who thought he could steal my future. 40 minutes later, I stepped into Titan Tech's sleek conference room, the Silicon Valley skyline glittering beyond the glass. Brandon sat alone at the head of the table, a far cry from the polished CEO I knew. His tie hung loose, his hair disheveled, and the veins in his temples throbbed from running his hands through it. "Fix it," he snapped as the door clicked shut, his voice raw with panic. I took my time, settling into a chair with deliberate calm, letting the silence stretch. "Fix what exactly?" I asked, my tone mild. His eyes blazed. "Don't play games, Lucy. You sabotaged the demo." I arched an eyebrow, feigning surprise. "How could I? I've been gone for 24 hours. Security watched me pack. I didn't take any devices, didn't access any systems." Brandon slammed his hand on the table, the sound echoing in the empty room. "The test run crashed the entire system. It started flagging threats that don't exist, generating thousands of false positives. It's unusable." I tilted my head, my voice steady. "Sounds like a technical issue. Have you tried turning it off and on again?" His face flushed crimson, a vein pulsing in his neck. "This isn't funny. We have 12 major investors coming tomorrow. $75 million are on the line." I leaned back, my expression neutral. "Your investors," I corrected. "Your system, now." His jaw tightened, but he forced a breath, his tone shifting to the smooth persuasion that had once charmed me. "Look, perhaps we were hasty yesterday. I'm prepared to discuss a more equitable arrangement. Co-creator credit, a larger compensation package, maybe equity." I folded my hands, unmoved. "What exactly happened during the test run?" Brandon hesitated, weighing how much to reveal. "The system turned on itself," he admitted. "It identified Titan Tech's network components as threats, then started generating reports, hundreds of them, documenting what it called internal ethical breaches." I couldn't suppress a faint smile. "Sentinel Shield is designed to identify threats, Brandon. All threats." His eyes narrowed, suspicion dawning. "What did you do?" I kept my voice even. "I didn't sabotage anything. Sentinel Shield is working as intended. It's an AI that learns and adapts to protect networks from malicious activity. During development, I fed it case studies of cyber attacks, including those from within organizations. His face paled, the pieces clicking into place. "You taught it to spy on us?" he whispered. "I taught it to recognize threats, wherever they originate," I said simply. The truth settled over him like a weight. Sentinel Shield hadn't malfunctioned. It had flagged Titan Tech and Brandon himself as risks, documenting every unauthorized access, every copied file, every keystroke he'd made in my server. The reports, complete with timestamps and logs, were a digital indictment of his betrayal. Silence gripped the room, thick and heavy. Brandon's anger faded, replaced by a calculating glint. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice low. I leaned forward, my demands precise. Full recognition as Sentinel Shield's creator and primary architect, 50% ownership of all related patents and intellectual property, a board seat to oversee its ethical implementation, and $10 million in compensation for your attempt to erase me. His jaw clenched. "That's extortion." I smiled thinly. "No, that's negotiation. Extortion would be sending those reports to the investors and the SEC. Brandon glared, but his shoulders slumped, defeat creeping in. "Can you fix it before tomorrow's demo?" he asked, voice tight. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a flash drive, and set it on the table. "This contains an authentication update to resolve the immediate issues. Consider it a gesture toward our new partnership. Contracts can be drawn up tomorrow." He stared at the drive, then at me, realization dawning. "You planned this all along." I stood, my gaze steady. "I hoped it wouldn't be necessary, but after finding you on my server 6 months ago, I built protections for Sentinel Shield and myself." In Silicon Valley, trust was a luxury, and I'd learned to rely on my defenses. The flash drive on the conference table gleamed under Titan Tech's fluorescent lights, a small token holding the key to Brandon Holt's salvation and my triumph. After outmaneuvering his betrayal, I'd forced him to see me not as a disposable coder, but as Sentinel Shield's indispensable creator. I'm Lucy, 32, and in that moment, I wasn't just reclaiming my work, I was rewriting my future in Silicon Valley's unforgiving landscape. As Brandon reached for the drive, his resignation palpable, I knew the battle wasn't over, but the war was mine to win. By morning, Titan Tech's sleek headquarters buzzed with a different energy. I returned not as an exile, but as co-founder and chief technology officer, my title etched on a new contract that bore my demands. 50% ownership of Sentinel Shield's patents, a board seat, and $10 million in compensation. Brandon greeted me with a smile as brittle as glass, his eyes betraying the resentment he couldn't voice. The investor demo loomed, and with my authentication update installed, Sentinel Shield was ready to perform. In the packed conference room, Silicon Valley's elite, venture capitalists in tailored suits, watched as I launched the system. It danced through simulated attacks with elegant precision, neutralizing threats with a speed that drew gasps. Brandon stood beside me, his voice steady as he introduced Titan Tech's groundbreaking solution. Then, an investor, eyes alight with interest, asked, "What inspired this system?" Brandon hesitated, a flicker of discomfort crossing his face. "It was Lucy's brainchild," he said, the words clipped. "Her vision from the start. We provided the environment for it to thrive." I stepped forward, answering technical questions with ease, my confidence a quiet rebuke to his earlier dismissal. 3 months later, Sentinel Shield proved its worth beyond the demo. A global banking network, targeted by a cyber attack that could have cost $340 million, emerged unscathed, its defenses bolstered by my system's predictive power. The news rippled through the tech world, and Titan Tech's valuation soared to $4.2 billion, cementing Sentinel Shield as the gold standard in cybersecurity. My phone buzzed during a board meeting, a notification from the system. Authentication restored, creator protections active. It was more than a technical update. It was a reminder that I'd secured my place, not just in the code, but in the company's future. Brandon and I settled into an uneasy equilibrium. He thrived in business development, charming investors, and sealing deals, his charisma a perfect fit for the boardroom. I led technical innovation. My lab, once again, my sanctuary, where I refined Sentinel Shield's algorithms and trained a team of engineers who shared my vision. We weren't friends. Trust, once broken, doesn't mend easily, but we were professionals, our roles clearly defined. I'd catch him watching me sometimes, his expression unreadable, perhaps wondering how he'd underestimated me so gravely. But I didn't dwell on his thoughts. My focus was on the system, ensuring it remained a force for good, its ethical guardrails as robust as its defenses. Silicon Valley taught me that victories are fleeting unless you protect them. My reinstatement wasn't just a personal win, it was a testament to Sentinel Shield's design, a system that safeguarded itself as fiercely as it protected networks. As I walked Titan Tech's halls, now a leader rather than a laborer, I felt the weight of what I'd achieved. I'd turned betrayal into opportunity, not by chance, but by design. The investors' applause still echoed in my mind, their questions a validation of my expertise. But the real triumph was knowing that no one, not Brandon, not Titan Tech, could erase me again. My legacy was coded into every line of Sentinel Shield, a shield that stood firm, just as I had. Looking back, I sometimes wonder if I could have fought Brandon Holt in court, dragged Titan Tech through legal mud, or walked away to start anew. But as Lucy, a 32-year-old who clawed her way to co-founder in Silicon Valley, I know my choice was right. By turning Sentinel Shield's defenses against Brandon's betrayal, I didn't just save my creation. I ensured its integrity and my control. This isn't just a story of tech and triumph. It's a lesson in protecting what you build. A truth I share now because you, too, have something worth defending. Sentinel Shield's success wasn't just technical. Its ethical core, now standard in every deployment, ensures transparency and prevents misuse, a reflection of my belief that technology is only as good as those who wield it. Last week, at our public offering celebration, $4.2 billion and counting, a young developer approached me, her eyes bright with ambition. "What's the secret to building something revolutionary?" she asked. I smiled, my answer simple yet profound. It's not just the code. It's understanding that threats often come from where you least expect. Build systems that adapt, defend themselves, and hold fast to their ethical foundation. She nodded, and I saw a spark of determination, the same fire that had driven me. My phone buzzed as I spoke, a quiet alert from Sentinel Shield. System integrity secured, protections active. It was a reminder of my journey, from betrayal to victory, and the system's unwavering loyalty to its creator. Now I turn to you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have sued, walked away, or fought from within, as I did? I want your thoughts, your stories of workplace betrayals, and how you stood your ground. Share them. Let's start a conversation about protecting what's ours. The greatest lesson I've learned is this: you are your first line of defense. In your job, your relationships, or that project you've poured your heart into, don't assume others will honor your work just because you do. Set boundaries, demand recognition, and build safeguards, just as I did with Sentinel Shield. Think about your life. Where do you need to draw a line or protect your legacy? My challenge to you is simple. Stand up for yourself. Leave a comment, share your experiences, and let's inspire each other to defend what we've built. In Silicon Valley and beyond, the real revolution isn't just in the tech. It's in the courage to claim your place and hold it, no matter who tries to take it away.
What do you do when your family hands you a gift that isn't a gift at all, but a quiet, ribbon-wrapped dismissal on my 29th birthday? I stood in our suburban dining room, fingers still tracing the bow on a sleek, black suitcase, as my father's words landed like a stone pack tonight. Be gone by morning. The air felt thin, the chandelier's light too sharp, and my sister's giggle, high and careless, cut deeper than the command itself. I'd bought a chocolate cake that afternoon, a small, hopeful thing with curling plastic letters, thinking we might still be a family that marked days like this. It sat untouched on the table, a silent witness to the moment I began to unravel. The dining room smelled of roasted garlic and my mother's lavender perfume, a strange mix of warmth and artifice. We'd gathered at the oak table, the one I'd helped refinish as a teenager, its scratches now hidden under a cream tablecloth. My parents sat across from me, dressed as if for a church luncheon, Mom in a navy blouse, Dad in a pressed collared shirt. Lily, 23 and radiant, lounged in her chair, her manicured nails tapping her phone. The suitcase sat in the center, its glossy surface catching the light like a warning. I'd thought, foolishly, it might mean a trip, a rare family gesture. Wow, I said, voice catching as I lifted the lid. Are we going somewhere? Their laughter wasn't warm, nor cruel, just hollow. Like I was the last to understand a joke told long ago. You are, Dad said. Folding his napkin with precision, Mom leaned forward, her smile thin as a paper cut. Pack your things. Sienna, you're leaving tomorrow. I blinked, hands still on the suitcase's handle, the room tilting slightly. Lily's giggle bubbled again, and I saw her smirk, half hidden behind her water glass. The cake, its frosting smudged from the car ride, seemed to mock me from its place between the place settings. I'd stopped at the grocery store after work, picking it out with care, imagining us sharing slices, maybe even laughing. No one had glanced at it. Okay, I said, because what else was there? My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. They didn't raise their voices or offer reasons. Mom's eyes flicked to Dad, then back to me, her expression not unkind but settled, as if this had been rehearsed. Dad cleared his throat, the sound he made before delivering news about budgets or car repairs. We've discussed it. He said, it's time for what I wanted to ask. But my throat tightened, and Lily's phone buzzed, pulling her attention. I sat there, the suitcase's weight pressing into my thoughts, and realized they'd stopped seeing me as their daughter long before this moment. I was a tenant whose lease had expired, and a line item was crossed out. That night, I lay in the twin bed I'd slept in since high school, the pale green walls closing in. Downstairs, I heard them laughter, the clink of forks, probably eating my cake. I stared at the ceiling, counting the plaster cracks like a rosary, trying to piece together when I'd become invisible. The suitcase loomed in the corner. Too clean, too new. A stranger in my room. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt the truth settle in. Cold and sharp, this wasn't about space or money. It was about a choice they'd made without me. At sunrise, I packed clothes, a secondhand laptop, and a photo of me at 20, grinning with my first paycheck. They were still asleep when my Uber pulled up. I shut the door softly, leaving no note, knowing they'd only notice I was gone when the next bill came due. 2 years before that suitcase shattered my world. I had a life that felt like mine, fragile but real. I was 27, living in a one-bedroom apartment above a nail salon in a noisy corner of the city, where the air always smelled faintly of acetone and sesame oil from the takeout place next door. The walls were thin, the beige carpet worn to threads, and the hot water flickered like a shy friend. But I loved it. It was mine rented. Yes, but paid for with every cent I earned. I'd sit at my wobbly kitchen table, a thrift store find, and picture a future home nothing grand. Just a place with a small kitchen window where sunlight could spill in. A lock only I held the key to. That dream kept me steady, a quiet pulse beneath my days. I worked as a project coordinator, a job that paid just enough to cover rent, groceries, and the occasional repair for my 2009 Honda Civic, a car held together by duct tape and stubborn hope. I packed lunches, tuna sandwiches, apple slices, reused coffee filters, and bought clothes from consignment shops. Every dollar saved was a brick in that imagined house. I'd scroll through online listings late at night, deleting items from my cart to stay on budget, whispering to myself, someday. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest, and I was proud of it, even if no one else noticed. Sunday dinners at my parents' suburban house were my tether to family. Though they always left me hollow, I'd drive the 40 minutes from the city, my Civic rattling over potholes, to sit at that same oak table. Lily, 6 years younger and somehow light years ahead in confidence, would breeze in with something new, a Gucci tote she needed for college, a smartwatch that cost more than my rent. Look, Sienna, she'd say, dangling a bracelet. Mom got me this for acing my midterm. I'd smile, nod, while Mom sighed, her eyes flickering between us like she wished we'd swap places. God, are you still wearing that sweater? Lily once laughed. Pointing at my faded cardigan, I shrugged, saying nothing. But the sting lingered. Mom never commented on Lily's spending or my thrift. Sometimes she'd touch my hand. A fleeting gesture. And I'd think, she sees me. Other times, she'd look through me, exhausted by my presence. Dad was worse, buried in his phone or muttering about work. Never asking about mine. I kept showing up, bringing side dishes I'd made on a budget, hoping someone would say, "Sienna, we're proud of you." That moment never came. Instead, I'd drive back to my apartment, the city lights blurring through my windshield, telling myself it was just a phase, that family meant patience. I wasn't naive, but I believed in steady effort. I'd grown up watching my parents navigate lean years, always pulling through. I thought my role was to be the reliable one, the one who didn't ask for much. Lily lived on a different planet. Her Instagram filled with beach trips and coffee dates, her room a shrine to designer labels. I didn't envy her. Not exactly. But I wondered how we diverged so sharply. Once, as I cleared the dinner table, I overheard Mom tell Lily, "Don't worry about the cost. We'll figure it out." I paused, sponge in hand, waiting for a similar softness aimed at me. It never came. Back in my apartment, I'd lie on my secondhand couch, the springs creaking, and stare at the ceiling's water stain, shaped like a lopsided heart. I'd think about that kitchen window, how it would frame a life I'd built alone. I didn't need much a place to breathe, to be seen. My lease renewal came every year, and I signed it with a kind of reverence, each signature a promise to myself. I was building something, slowly, quietly, and I thought it was enough. But as I'd learn, no amount of effort could make a family love you if they'd already decided you were expendable. The Sunday pot roast was still in the oven, its savory warmth curling through the house, when my father's voice cut through the haze of clinking silverware. "We need to talk," he said, eyes fixed on his plate, his jaw tight with the weight of something inevitable. My mother folded her napkin into sharp creases, her fingers trembling just enough to betray her calm. I set my fork down. The dining room's familiar wallpaper, faded roses climbing toward the ceiling, suddenly stifling. They told me about the layoffs, how the company had gutted his department, leaving us teetering on the edge of a mortgage we couldn't carry. "Would you consider moving back?" my mother asked, her voice soft but deliberate. "Just for a bit, to help us through." I felt a warning flicker in my chest, a whisper that returning might trap me. But their faces, her red-rimmed eyes, his slumped shoulders, my sister's uncharacteristic stillness pulled me in. I said yes, because family, I thought, meant showing up. I gave notice on my apartment, the one I'd loved despite its quirks, and packed my life into a storage unit off the highway, where my thrift store table and creaky couch gathered dust. The bedroom I returned to, once my sanctuary with its pale green walls, was no longer mine. My sister had turned it into a walk-in closet, her silk dresses draped along the walls like a museum of her whims. They'd cleared just enough space for a twin bed, its frame wedged between shoe racks. That first night, I lay awake, the faint scent of her jasmine perfume clinging to the air, and told myself this was temporary. My father's promise, just until I'm back on my feet, echoed in my mind. A lifeline I clung to as I stared at the ceiling's familiar cracks. I set up a monthly transfer of $1, $800 to my mother's account, watching the numbers drain from my savings like water from a cracked bucket. It went to the mortgage, utilities, my sister's college tuition or so, I assumed. I never asked for receipts, and they never offered thanks. At first, there were small gestures. My mother made chicken pot pie, my favorite, its crust golden and flaky. My father called me his rock, his hand briefly on my shoulder. My sister even asked about my job once, her voice distracted but curious. I held on to those moments, fragile as they were, believing they meant we were still a family. But gratitude erodes fast in a house where roles are set. By the second month, the pot pie stopped appearing. My father's new job, less pay. Longer hours came and went without a conversation about my leaving. Just a little longer. My mother said one evening, her tone more expectation than request. I nodded, swallowing the question I didn't dare ask. How much longer? The house felt like a stage where I played a ghost. My sister's laughter filled the rooms. Her new purchases, a smartwatch. A leather jacket paraded at dinners I no longer felt welcome at. My mother's sighs grew sharper when I left dishes in the sink. As if my presence was a burden, my father barely spoke. His attention lost in bills or the TV's hum. I kept giving, kept transferring, kept hoping they'd see me again. I'd walk past my old bedroom door, now half blocked by a rack of her coats, and feel the space I'd once claimed shrinking. The kitchen, where I'd once pictured my window, was theirs, filled with her snack packs and my mother's herbal teas. I told myself I was helping, that this was what love looked like, quiet, unasked for sacrifice. But as the months blurred, I began to wonder if love was supposed to feel this hollow, this one-sided, this much like disappearing. The shift was so gradual, I barely noticed until it was undeniable. My father's new job stretched into months. Yet the $1, $800 I sent each month vanished without a word of relief. My baths, once a small refuge, were deemed wasteful. My mother's glance at the water bill carried a silent accusation. Dinners, once a ritual of lasagna and shared stories, morphed into whatever my sister craved: quinoa bowls. Sushi takeout, while my contributions went unmentioned. Her new shoes, glossy and impractical, clicked across the hardwood as she flaunted them, while my sneakers, their soles thinning, carried me to work and back. I didn't ask where her money came from, but the question gnawed at me, especially when my shampoo bottle emptied faster than I could afford to replace it. It was a Friday, my body heavy from a week of overtime on a last-minute project. When the fracture came, I trudged into the house, craving only a hot shower and the worn pages of my book. Instead, my sister was waiting at the foot of the stairs, her eyes bright with expectation. "I need $700, she said, as if it were as simple as borrowing a pen. I set my bag down, exhaustion sharpening my voice. For what, she huffed, tossing her hair. "My beach trip is next weekend. 2 hotel rooms, 3 nights. Everyone's paid their share. I just need yours." The absurdity of it, her assumption. Her ease snapped something inside me. "You think I have $700 lying around?" I said, keeping my tone low but firm. "I give $1, $800 every month to this house. I drive a car that's falling apart. My shoes have holes. And you want me to fund your vacation?" Her smile vanished, replaced by a scowl. "Why are you so dramatic?" "It's just money," I laughed, the sound bitter and unfamiliar. "No, it's not. It's weeks of overtime. Skipped meals. Saying no to everything I want so you can live like this." Her eyes welled, but the tears felt rehearsed. "You're calling me lazy," she wailed, her voice carrying down the hall. My parents appeared, summoned by her sobs, my mother's arms wrapping around her as if I'd struck her. "What's going on?" my father demanded, his jaw clenched. I stood my ground, voice shaking but steady. "She asked for $700 for a trip?" I said no. My mother's gaze turned icy. "And you told her to get a job?" I exhaled. I told her the truth. My father's voice was a blade. "That's not your place." I looked at them, their anger a wall, her smug tears peeking through her hands. "This house runs on my paycheck." I said, "I think I've earned a say." My mother's words cut deepest every time we ask for anything. "You throw your money in our faces." That was when I knew they didn't love me. They needed me. Until they didn't. The suitcase came the next day, my birthday, wrapped in a bow that mocked my hope. I packed in silence, left at dawn, and found a hostel where the air smelled of Lysol and burnt toast. For the first time in months, I could breathe. After 2 nights, I texted Carol, my coworker with a sharp tongue and a softer heart. She didn't pry, just offered her couch and strong coffee. At her apartment, I let the tears come quiet, steady, like a faucet finally unstuck. "You don't owe them your life," she said, handing me a blanket. And those words cracked open a truth I'd buried. A week later, I signed a lease on a studio apartment. Its linoleum peeling, but mine. I furnished it with secondhand treasures, a mattress with a faint stain, a desk with wobbly legs, a lamp whose shade tilted like a drunk. Each item was a stitch in a life I was sewing back together. I made tea in a chipped mug, drank it barefoot on the cold tile, and smiled. The taste sharper than any meal in that house. 6 months passed, my savings creeping upward without the monthly drain. I packed lunches again, washed dishes by hand. But now it was my choice, not their demand. The silence of my studio was kind, not heavy, and for the first time, I felt solid, like a shadow stepping into light. The quiet of my studio apartment, with its slanted lamp and chipped mugs, felt like a fortress until the phone rang one gray afternoon. An unknown number piercing the calm. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen, but curiosity won. My mother's voice, syrupy and practiced, spilled through. "We need to talk," she said, as if no suitcase had ever sat between us. "Can you come by?" I leaned against the counter, the tile cold under my bare feet, and said, "No, say it now." A pause, then her sigh, heavy with performance. "Your father's job is gone again. Layoffs. The bank's talking foreclosure. We're drowning." The words were meant to pull me back, but they only sharpened the edges of my resolve. "I'm not coming back," I said, voice steady as granite. "Never." Her tone tightened, a thread of guilt woven in. "You're our daughter." I laughed, sharp and brief. "You should have thought of that when you treated me like a bank account with a pulse." I hung up, and the silence that followed was cleaner than any I'd known in their house. But they didn't stop. Texts came next, please, then demands. Each number unfamiliar but reeking of their desperation. My sister's voicemail was the worst. Her voice soft with crocodile tears. "I miss you. We need you." I deleted it, my finger trembling, not with doubt but with the weight of finally refusing. Then an email arrived, formal and cold, from a lawyer claiming I owed $24,000 for unpaid room and board over 2 years. The audacity was almost artful. But it didn't scare me, it lit a fire. I called James, a lawyer friend whose wit matched his precision. He didn't flinch, drafting a response that same day. A blade of logic and evidence. He attached bank records, $200 in transfers, $800 each month, sent without fail to their account. He described the half closet I'd slept in, the bills I'd paid without a contract, and the eviction delivered on my birthday. His final line was a checkmate. "We are prepared to counterclaim for the full amount plus legal fees and emotional damages." 3 days later, their lawyer's reply was a single sentence, retreating like a scolded dog. "My clients will not proceed." I thought that was the end. But fate had one more card to play. Weeks later, I walked into my local bank to set up a savings plan. My folder of papers tucked under my arm. There they were, my mother and sister, seated at a loan officer's desk, dressed like they were auditioning for respectability. My mother's pearls gleamed under the fluorescent lights. My sister's blazer was crisp, too expensive for the story they were selling. I nearly turned away, but a spark of defiance rooted me to the spot. I stepped to the back of the line, close enough to hear my mother's polished plea. "We're just looking to refinance. There's no one else we can ask." The banker frowned. "No family support." My mother shook her head, voice low. "Just the two of us." I moved forward, placing my folder gently on the desk's edge. "Actually," I said, my tone calm as a still lake, "you had help when $800 a month for 2 years. Bank of America. Account ending 2074. Transfers every first." The room stilled. My sister's face drained of color. My mother's mouth opened, then closed. The banker's eyes flicked between us. I laid down the documents, nodded, and walked out. The glass door swinging shut behind me. The late afternoon sun was warm, golden, like it knew I was free. A year after that bank encounter, I stood in a narrow townhouse at the edge of an older neighborhood, its creaky steps and crooked mailbox welcoming me like old friends. The keys in my hand felt heavier than their size, each one a testament to a life I'd carved from the wreckage. I'd signed the papers that morning, the deed bearing only my name. No co-signers, no strings. The driveway's weeds poked through cracked concrete, and the kitchen's linoleum was scuffed. But it was mine. A home where no one could push me out. I called Carol first, and she arrived with a thermos of coffee and lemon muffins, inspecting my cabinets with mock scrutiny. Not fancy, she said, grinning. But it's yours. I smiled, the words sinking deep. That's what matters. Work had become a steadier rhythm. Not just survival, but growth. A new client, referred by James, led to side projects that padded my income, enough to buy a new couch, still secondhand, but chosen with care. I wasn't wealthy, but fear no longer stalked my days. I'd pack my lunch, a habit I kept not from need but from pride, each sandwich a reminder of my agency. The townhouse's silence was gentle, broken only by the hum of a kettle or the occasional creak of floorboards. I'd walk barefoot across the cool tiles, sip tea by the window, and feel the weight of my existence, no longer borrowed or bartered. Rumors reached me sometimes, carried by distant relatives who didn't know I'd severed the tie. The old house might be in foreclosure, they said. My sister's tuition payments were late. My mother was struggling. My father was distant. I listened without reaction, not from spite, but from a quiet disinterest, like hearing about a town I'd left behind. I didn't hate them. I simply no longer belonged to their story. Blood. I'd learned wasn't a contract I had to honor. The suitcase still sat in my closet. Not a wound, but a marker of the day I chose myself. I'd open the door sometimes, see its clean lines, and feel not anger, but clarity. I hadn't lost everything that day, only the illusion of their love. My life now was small but deliberate. I planted herbs in cracked pots by the kitchen window, their green tips catching the morning light. I hung a thrift store painting, a lopsided sailboat on a stormy sea above the fireplace, its imperfection a mirror of my own. Carol would visit, her laughter filling the rooms, and we'd talk about nothing and everything, her hard candies rattling in their tin. The townhouse wasn't a dream house, but it was a home, its walls holding only the echoes I invited. I'd sit on the porch some evenings, the air thick with summer's hum, and think about the family I'd left. Did they speak of me? Did they claim I'd drifted away? Or did they rewrite the story to erase their choice? I pictured my mother staring at unpaid bills, sighing into her teacup, saying, things were easier when we had help, never admitting what that help cost. My sister, I imagined, still filled rooms with her complaints, her wants spilling over like an untended fire. I didn't need their confession. I'd paid their mortgage, kept their lights on, carried their weight while they turned away. My proof wasn't in their words, but in the life I'd built, the keys in my pocket, the emails I left unanswered, the home I owned outright. If anyone asked about the daughter who vanished, they'd have to decide lie or face the truth of who they'd pushed out. I wasn't gone. Not really. I'd simply stepped beyond their reach, into a world where my voice mattered, where my boundaries held. As I locked my door each night, the click was a promise, not a barrier. This was my life, and for the first time, it belonged only to me.